Hey everyone, welcome to the Naked Conversations podcast. I'm your host, Sage Hobbs, author and creator of Naked Communication, and I'm so psyched you're here. This show is all about taking charge of your life in new and inspired ways to create a life you deeply love. It's about being more you in all areas of your life, more courageous, more free, more alive, more naked. I'll be sharing stories and advice from amazing people around the world who are up to incredible things on how they are successfully breaking free from fear and old patterns in order to create incredible relationships and impactful lives so that you can do the same. This is the place to be inspired to live a courageous and naked life. Let's do this. Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the Naked Conversations podcast. I am so glad that you're here. Today's guest is really special to me. Her name is Tanya Sheckley, and her story just touched me profoundly and deeply when I got to meet her earlier in this year at an event for women speakers around the country. And I believe we were out to dinner when she, with her quiet, soft, but very strong way, began to share her story with me and the other women we were having a meal with. I was unbelievably inspired by her courage, her resilience, her passion, and her heart. Tanya shares the story of raising a child with cerebral palsy and losing that child unexpectedly, the way that she navigated the pain and the grief of that while still raising two other children, and how she took that anguish and pushed it forward into creating a movement to really have educational opportunities for kids with all types of disabilities, needs, and challenges. She's creator of Up Academy, a social entrepreneurship endeavor to really build a school, a sort of modern day one-room schoolhouse that supports all kinds of kids in reaching their full potential. And her story is just so beautiful and so real. She's smart, she's kind, and it's really what I love to talk about here on Naked Conversations, which is women who kind of find themselves as unexpected leaders in some way, who really show up courageously even when it's hard to do so, who are up to living big and bold lives even when it takes something to do that. And it really has taken something for Tanya to get where she is today. So I'm super excited to share this episode with you. And you can find all the information and resources over, as always, on the show notes at sagebhobbs.com/episode-15, sagebhobbs.com/episode-15. Also over there on my site, please check out all of my resources around how to make powerful requests and have the relationships you really want. And if you want to work with me, you can find out how to do that over there too. Without further ado, I'm really excited to introduce you to Tanya. Thanks for being here. Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the Naked Conversations podcast. I am so excited for you to meet my amazing guest today. Tanya Sheckley has an incredible story to share, and she's really making a huge impact in the world with her love and her heart and her determination and her drive. So I'm so happy she's here. Thanks for being here, Tanya.
Thank you for having me, Sage. I'm really excited to be a part of your show.
Yay. So I always start with one question that I ask everyone, and I'm curious what your answer is to this, and then we'll dive into your story and your work. But I'm curious what courage means to you.
What courage means to me? I think that courage is stepping up and stepping out of your natural boundaries, whatever those are, and trying something new and different and figuring out a new way of being in the world, whether it's as simple as asking a different question in a daily conversation or as complex as really changing your entire life and career. It doesn't matter. All those little steps of courage are part of what helps to build us and make us stronger and help us be adventurous in the world.
I love that. I love that you put it to the small things about asking questions that you wouldn't otherwise ask to the bigger ones as well. It's great.
That's one of the hardest things for me.
Totally. Those human interactions. I mean, like, it's funny. That's totally in line with my work too. It's just like that human authentic experience is actually some of the scariest stuff that people face, you know?
Absolutely.
So, all right. So tell us, most people are probably new to you and what you're creating in the world. And I wanted you just to start off by telling us about your work with the Up Academy and how it came to be.
Sure. So I'm founding a school that is an inclusive elementary school focused on children with physical disabilities and creating a new educational method for how we include and how we interact and how we create a whole school experience for all children through personalized learning and through the use of projects and working together and collaboration and problem solving. In our case, against all abilities, but it's really useful for all kids everywhere. I came about it through working with my daughter. My oldest daughter, Eliza, was born with cerebral palsy, and she at birth had no suck, swallow, or gag. I, at one point in the hospital, had a doctor stand in front of me and tell me that my daughter would never be normal. So we started all of the work and all of the therapy and all of the research that we could, learning everything about neuroplasticity, everything about child development, seeking out specialists and therapists all around the world to try and help us make things possible for her. I remember having a neurologist appointment when she was maybe around a year old and just saying, will she be able to start kindergarten? Like, all I wanted at that point was for her to start kindergarten on time with her peers. And in my mind's eye, that meant her walking into class with her peers. And I didn't say that, so I don't think that part came across. But he looked at me and was like, yeah, I see no reason why that can't happen. She's curious. She's socially engaged. She's interested in things. Like, yeah, that could happen.
Wow. That's actually, so two different physicians giving you kind of different messages in some ways too, right? Like, which
Absolutely.
is awesome. Like
it's part of what you learn throughout, I think, any parenting journey and any journey of advocacy is partially to seek out the people who say the things you want to hear, for lack of a better term. You find the positive people and the people who are going to help you move forward, not the people who are just going to tell you what the problem is. And so for us, that was part of it. And part of it also is that she was born in a small regional hospital. And we had doctors who had really never seen a child like her born.
Wow. Okay.
And they really didn't know what they were doing. And it took us a couple of weeks to get our wits about us and figure out what to do next and get her transferred. And we moved to, at that time we were in Southern California, we got her transferred to UCLA. And our entire experience from there moving forward was different. They still didn't have a lot of answers. Another thing I've learned throughout, that journey in the medical world is that it really is the practice of medicine, and that every doctor has a different experience and a different base of knowledge. And so while they may work in the same institute or have the same title, they don't have the same knowledge or same information or same outlook.
Yeah, right.
on working with people. So yeah, it was really nice a year later to hear that, she's socially great. She's curious. She's, her intellect is all intact, and we saw no reason why she couldn't start school.
So honestly, it was a message of hope, right? Which every parent wants, especially when faced with an unforeseeable challenge. And it sounds to me like you immediately, I'm curious about this. It sounds to me like you immediately, with your husband, dove into like solutions, right? Like looking for answers, looking for the solutions, looking for people who would support your vision of what was possible for her. Can we just rewind for a minute and into that first year for parents who might be listening, who have children who were born, the term is special needs. I don't know how you feel about that term, actually. I'd be curious to ask you, but outside of the quote unquote normal spectrum, right? What it was like for you when that first happened and you were going, oh my gosh, what's our next move here?
Well, when we first sat, the first doctor in the first hospital, and I had a pretty clear vision of how I wanted to parent. I was an older, being that I was 34. I was an older parent as a first parent. But at 34, a lot of my friends had already had kids, right? So I had some opportunity to take a look at how we might want to parent, which is a whole different topic of conversation, but is definitely something that's overlooked, at least in this country. We talk a lot about birth and the birth process and your birthing plan and where you're going to give birth. And the process of pregnancy, and first-time parents go through prenatal classes and learn about what's happening in their belly and their body and all these changes. But nobody talks about what happens when the baby comes out.
Mm-hmm.
Like, what kind of parent are you going to be? How are you going to deal with different situations? What are you going to feed this child? And so by being a little bit older, I had the opportunity to think about all of those things. And so when she was born, I knew that we wanted to breastfeed. I knew that I wanted to hold her. I knew that we wanted to do a lot of skin to skin. I knew it was really important for her development to be close to me specifically, but definitely to a parent, because my husband's voice was very familiar to her.
Mm-hmm.
And because of our situation, and because she was a C-section in the middle of the night, and because I was taken to recovery, like, it was him that was there and it was his chest that she was on. Mm-hmm. And so it's all through her life, it was really his smell that would be super comforting to her.
Wow.
I mean, she loved me and I would comfort her and she'd, cuddle in and be snuggly and be my little girl, but she was really close to him. And I think a lot of it was because of those first few hours. Mm-hmm. But going back to your question, the doctor a week or so out came out and said, your daughter's never going to be normal. And I'm standing there and I went through 7 hours of natural labor before we had a C-section. I wouldn't take any painkillers. I didn't believe in giving my baby drugs. I had this very strong vision of what it was all going to be like. And so I have her and I have tears running down my face and I'm looking at him and I'm like, he's wrong. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And luckily for me, my husband's ex-girlfriend before me, who he dated for 5 years, helped her through grad school, was a pediatric occupational therapist. So for me, in my mind, as soon as somebody said, she's not going to be normal, she's going to need therapy, you need to look for this as soon as you possibly can, my immediate go-to was, no, I don't need that. She's going to be fine. We don't need therapy. We'll figure it out.
Interesting.
Like, how can a newborn need therapy? And my husband's going, yes, we need all the help we can get. Who do we talk to? How do we get connected? How can you help us? And so in my hormonal fuzz of a new parent.
Yeah, and total shock, because you think you did everything right. You were doing everything, quote unquote, right. You know what I mean? In terms of wellness and preparation. And it got turned on its head.
Yeah, I mean, I wasn't working. I was napping every day. I was taking my prenatal yoga classes.
Exactly.
I was eating right. I had the opportunity to stay home and be pregnant, which was amazing in itself.
Yeah.
But I had this husband who was gung-ho about making sure she got all the help that she needed, where I'm still in my mind going, she doesn't need help. We're fine.
Right.
She's a baby. And so it was really him who helped us through that and was the strength and the push to move towards getting her what she needed. And once we got into that network and connected to the right people, and I really started to see that this was really helpful and she really did need this. And then it was, what else do we do and how else do we help her and what else is out there? Because this can't possibly be it.
Right. So you really did this unbelievable transition from denial to advocacy.
I think that there was a sense of denial. In fact, I know there was a sense of denial up until the point she hit kindergarten.
Okay, that long.
We never applied for a disabled placard. We never wanted any special treatment. We didn't get her wheelchairs. We didn't get her special equipment. And she was pretty involved. She needed a lot of care. She couldn't sit on her own. She couldn't walk. She couldn't crawl. She couldn't speak. She needed a lot of support and a lot of care, but I still didn't think that she needed all of that stuff, all of that heavy equipment, all of that stuff that makes her look disabled. To me, she was just my sweet little girl and she needed a little extra help. And so we found other ways and other products and other things to do to help her where she wouldn't stand out quite so much. And it wasn't until she hit kindergarten. And I would, I'd get reports from therapists all the time. Well, this is where she is and this is how she's progressing and these are her goals. And I know most of the other special needs parents that I know have these giant folders and file cabinets and have all of this paperwork stored everywhere.
Yeah.
I threw it all away.
Oh my gosh, Tanya, you were a rebel.
I figured if I really needed it for insurance or something else, the therapist had it all on file and I could go get it. And it just didn't matter to me because none of that was my daughter.
Got it.
That was someone's evaluation of her. That wasn't who she was. And so it just wasn't important to me to have all of that paperwork.
Mm-hmm. So what shifted? I mean, you got here now, she went to kindergarten, and some things, while you continue to be fiercely seeing her as a whole child, which I love about you, something shifted from the denial to a larger voice, a larger advocacy, a larger, different type of way of fighting for her, it sounds like.
Yeah. So for one, I got to the first day of school and I couldn't park. There was nowhere to park. The 2 disabled spots were open and I couldn't park anywhere else. And at this point in time, I have my 5-year-old who's starting kindergarten. I have a 3-year-old who is super excited that her big sister is starting kindergarten.
Aww.
And I have a newborn in my arms who is almost 3 months old.
Wow.
And I'm
Wow.
trying to figure out how to get my little girl, and I don't even think she had a wheelchair yet at that point. I know we got it near the time of beginning kindergarten because she had to have one to go on field trips so that they could, strap the wheelchair down into the bus and make her safe because there was no other way for her to do that. But I'm not even sure she had a wheelchair yet. And so I have these 3 kids and it's the first day of school and I'm realizing that my daughter can't walk in like all these other kids can.
Wow.
And I need that disabled placard so that I can park in that spot because I also have to juggle these other 2 kids and there's no other way for me to do this.
That's like literally a moment. That's one of those moments, right? Where you're like, okay, reality just shined itself to you in a different way, showed itself to you in a different way. Yeah. Yes. Got it.
But going back to her neurologist saying that, yes, she'd be able to start kindergarten on time and, with her peers, we asked her when we got to school if she wanted to walk in or if she wanted to be carried in. And she opted to walk, which she could take steps, she could balance, she needed support, but I could hold on to her shoulders and she could walk. And so she walked into her first day of kindergarten. And we had looked all over for the appropriate school for her to find a place where they would continue all of the therapies and different modalities of things that we had done, that we had seen had made a difference in her life. And when we got to the school district said, no, we don't need to do all of that. We only need to offer what allows her access to school.
Got it.
Which, they're taking away a huge possibility of her potential. Just because now she's in a chair 6 hours a day. She's not walking. She's not moving. She's not balancing. She's not sitting. She's not moving around the classroom like all the other kids are. She's not given that freedom because there's nobody there trained in the way to support her. And the school district has said we only need to allow her access here, which means they can wheel her in a wheelchair and she now has access to the classroom.
Right. That's pretty standard nationwide, I believe. Right?
I believe it is. To me, it seems like an incredibly low standard of what we're asking of our students. Any other student is given the opportunity and the ability to reach their potential. If they're smarter, they're given extra work. If they have other needs, maybe they're given extra time to run on the playground or given extra supports. And I'm not saying she wasn't given extra supports because she definitely was, but it wasn't anywhere near what she would need to come anywhere close to what her potential was or to give her the possibility of being independent later in life.
Right. So it was more like get to baseline versus get to thrive.
Not even just allow access, not even get to baseline.
Okay. Okay. Got it. So
in the way the district wording is written, they don't even have to guarantee that she actually learned and got an education. They just have to allow her access to be within the school.
Okay.
And so I got really angry at that and started looking for different options. And there really wasn't anything out there that provided the type of education that we were looking for her and that so many other kids like her would need to thrive. And throughout this, as I said, I have 2 other children. And so what do their educational needs look like also? What are the things that all kids need to thrive? Right? What's going to benefit them in the future? And what's maybe not being offered in our regular public schools that would really be helpful towards them being productive and successful people in the world when they grow up? Because in an elementary school, that's really what we're doing, right? We're building little people and we're building their character and we're building some of their personality traits and the way that they deal with the world and and how they learn and whether they like to learn and the things they like to learn, and helping them to build all of those skills. And so how do we do that for all of our children?
I love it.
I was terrified to send Eliza to school. She couldn't walk. She couldn't chase another kid if they hurt her. She couldn't say anything back if they said something mean. She couldn't come home and tell me if something bad happened at school. And conversely, she couldn't come home and tell me if something super awesome happened at school.
Right.
I was reliant on her notebook that her teachers and therapists and aides wrote in about the things that happened throughout her day and their interpretation of how she felt about it, because I wasn't there. And so I was terrified to send her. And really an amazing thing happened. I was frightened that the other kids would make fun of her. I was frightened that she wouldn't fit in. I was frightened that she would be so different that it would be a challenge. And what happened was all of the kids just saw another kid. And they wanted to play with her the same way they played with any other kid. They invited her into their games. They talked with her. They wanted to work with her in their project groups. They would argue over who got to sit next to her at lunch or who got to go on her bus and the field trips. She was really popular and social, and her curiosity and her social instinct and her way about interacting with the world really paid off for her. And she made a bunch of friends, and seeing the way that worked in a good inclusion classroom, because we were lucky that she had a phenomenal kindergarten teacher.
Awesome. Yeah.
I think that gets back to your original question of what brought me to this work and talking about the school.
Yeah. And so, yeah, exactly. So you've been on a whole, let me just actually summarize for some people who are listening, because there's going to be people listening who have children with special needs. And if that term, I just want to say, if that term isn't the one that lands for you listening, I respect whatever term you choose to use. I'm just going to use that one for the sake of ease here. It might be an imperfect term, right?
We could have a full conversation about terminology and not come to any conclusion. So
Exactly. But I want to respect how, people can use whatever term suits them. Replace it in your mind while you're listening. But I'll use special needs. If there's people listening who have been there in some way, this incredible path from denial to reality to wait, I'm going to define our own reality, to breaking molds, to popularity for a child who was nonverbal and wheelchair bound at times. And to those of us who don't have that exact experience, you really have stepped into something super courageously now as a leader and an advocate for a whole different way of doing education, right? That is, I think, you believe is beneficial to all kinds of kids, right? So tell us a little bit. It's obviously driven by your own personal story, but I can tell it's something beyond Eliza for you.
It is, and it's grown and it's gotten so much bigger and so much greater than what we started out just to make the school. Mm-hmm. And we looked at starting out and just creating a school for kids with special needs, and then, as I said, seeing her process of inclusion and seeing how great that was for all of the kids and all of the families involved and everybody that, was in her class and in her school and everybody that knew us, just the ways that everybody was able to grow and change and accept and look at different people in a different light. Mm-hmm. Differences were very glaringly obvious, but it holds true for anybody who has any difference. And the farther I get into the world of working in education and working with children, there's no such thing as a typical child. Everybody has their thing and everybody has a little difference. And it's how do we accept all of those, and how do we not work together despite them, but work together because of them, because it all makes us stronger and creates new ways of looking at problems and situations.
Yeah.
That can really benefit the whole world.
Yeah. So how did you decide to actually open Up Academy?
It was through seeing her in school and seeing how great that was. There was still a lot that she was missing. And the more families that I talked to, the more I heard that, yes, this was a need, and yes, we agree with you, and yes, it would be great if we had a place like that for our kids. And wow, if it was full inclusion, of course we'd send our siblings and we'd tell our friends, and what an amazing thing that we can build. And if we can create this little microcosm of a space where everybody is valued and everybody's ideas are listened to and everybody can be part of solving problems in every project, maybe we can take that into the world in some small way and start to make the world see that, make our agreement reality of what the world is and how people are valued. Maybe we can start to shift that a little bit. And so it grew into that. And we started looking at opening the school, and we laid down the framework. We built a business plan. We got our 501c3 application approved and became a real nonprofit entity. And then my daughter passed away. And so we were stunned and shocked. And I kind of took a breath for a moment and went, what do we do now? Everything that we had gotten to at this point was really focused on making her life as the best that it could be and giving her all of the possibilities that we could. And of course, focusing on our other children as well. And how do we include everybody? And that was part of, the inclusive school as well. Is like I can take all 3 kids. Like they'll all benefit from this. They'll all get an amazing education from this. Our main focus and reason and push and the reason it was so important was suddenly gone.
Mm-hmm. So I want to pause here for a second. So when I met Tanya, those of you listening, I met her not that long ago. I guess it was past April, right? And I think I met you in the pause after Eliza died and when you were deciding how this was going to move forward with Up. Or you had just I don't think Up had opened yet. And you spoke to the group and you just broke our hearts wide open. And I thought, oh my gosh, this woman is a total badass. She is so real and raw and heart-centered, and she's lived through something that most of us can't imagine living through. And here she is still looking at how she can serve. So I just want to pause there for a moment and just talk about how you dealt with grief. I feel like this is the second podcast interview I've done where we talk about grief. And I feel like it's not talked about enough in our society. So here you had, it's not talked about enough how you're going to parent, and it's not talked about enough how we're going to really educate kids with a variety of needs. And then number 3 is you are now found yourself grieving, and it's something else that's not talked about enough in our Western society, in my opinion. So I wonder if you would be willing to speak to what that was like for you and your family and how you've continued to move through it.
You're right. Number 1, it's not talked about enough at all. I had someone come to me 2 weeks after she passed away and say, oh, well, her celebration of life is over. Everybody's gone home. Things must be getting back to normal for you.
Oh my gosh. Whew.
I was just like, who are you? Like, what?
Right. Mama Bear wanted to come out and do some that makes me want to do some harm. And I know that wasn't the intention of the words, but wow, people don't know what to say.
And that's okay. It's okay that people don't know what to say. And I would prefer for people to say something than to say nothing, and to acknowledge that she was a part of this world in our lives and ask about her and ask about us rather than not say anything. Because frankly, it's weird when people don't say anything. Which
of course,
those encounters as well, where I'm like, well, we're going through this process and we lost our daughter. She passed away, and there's no emotion and no comment, and that's weird too. But I think that is a big part of what our society teaches, is that if we avoid it, it didn't happen.
Yeah.
But it was, kind of my response to that person was, things will never be normal again. This isn't okay. My life will never be the same. There will always, and the more time goes on, the more I realize this is true. There is always just a piece of me missing.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's very literally a piece. I created this piece. It grew inside of me. It was a part of me. It came from my flesh, and now it's not here.
Mhm. Yeah. I think anybody who's lost a child probably can relate to exactly those words. I really get.
With grief, it's a finicky thing.
Mm.
It
Mm-hmm.
comes and goes. And I'd say for the first, like you said, you kind of met me in the pause when I was just coming out of it. And it was, my daughter passed away in March of 2016. And so I met you just over a year after that.
Mm-hmm.
And it literally took me a year to be able to function really beyond the daily needs.
Yeah. And I think for some, it takes longer. I mean, I
Yeah.
think it's a wide spectrum. And I want to just give permission if you're listening and you've had loss and you're dealing with grief, like it's a spectrum, the experience of how we move through it, how we continue on with our lives. I don't even want to say move on because I don't think you move on, but that we continue on with our lives in the face of that kind of tragedy.
Yeah, it's for a long time I couldn't do anything. Everything felt too hard. Everything felt overwhelming. I just felt like I didn't have any motivation to do anything.
Mm-hmm. Understandably, yeah.
For me, it manifested somewhat physically as well, which was very strange because I'm a person who had always gotten my stress out and my question answered through exercise. So I would run, I would rock climb, I would snowboard, I would get outside, I would go work out, I would find a way to kind of sweat till I felt better.
Yeah. I'm not that person, but I've often admired those who are.
It's been my way of dealing with stress and just of calming my mind a lot of times. But I went out for a run about a week after she died. I woke up like full of energy one morning and just needed to do something. And I went out for a run and I got about 5 blocks from my house and my ankle was hurting so badly that I had to turn around and walk home.
Wow.
And
interesting.
I hadn't twisted it. It wasn't injured. I didn't step on anything. It was just hurting so badly that I couldn't do it. And I went to the gym to work out with my husband about a week after that. He was doing a workout and I was like, oh, I'll come with you. Maybe that'll make me feel something.
Feel something, right.
And so I go to work out with him, and this time it's my knee on my other leg, and it's aching and creaking, and I can't do any squats or lunges or anything that requires putting any weight on or bending my knee, which is kind of the knee's function.
Right. So just started breaking down.
And it's just like my whole body was, and the only way I could think about it was just that my body and my spirit was so overwhelmed with dealing with everything else that had happened that my body was just rebelling and saying, I can't do more right now. Like, I know you want to exercise, but I can't do it. I'm overloaded with everything that's happened and I can't do it.
So what did you do? What did you do instead? Like, how did you move through that year? And how do you now even? It hasn't been that long. I guess it hasn't even still been that long, an hour, a year and a half.
I cried.
Mm-hmm.
I still cry a lot.
Yeah.
But, I'm super lucky and grateful that I have 2 other children. 2 of them together, playing with each other and their laughter and getting them out into the world. And still, as a parent, my job was and still is to help my children find all of their possibilities and reach all of their potential. And because of the loss of one child, that doesn't stop for the other 2. And, moving forward with them and getting them to the things that they enjoyed and making sure that they're okay. My daughter did 12 weeks of a group therapy program with other kids who had lost someone because she wanted to talk to other kids, and finding ways to help other people through it and talk about it and try to understand it is, I think, what's really helped us to move forward. And that was the big part of choosing to move forward with opening the school, is No, Eliza's not here. She's not going to benefit from that. But there are 17 million people worldwide with cerebral
Wow.
palsy.
Wow.
There are hundreds of thousands in the US alone, and very few of these kids are getting the things that they need on a daily basis and still have time to be a kid. And so there's still so much possibility to help so many kids and use all of the things that we learned in our time with her to benefit the world. And so we felt like we had been given all of this knowledge and it still needed to do something with
Tanya,
it.
that is, I mean, and what a way to serve Eliza's legacy. Honestly, to say, look, one of the gifts of a tragedy was that we learned so much that we could hopefully help share with the world in a bigger way. It's incredible. So now, where's Up Academy now, and how are you as a family moving through life without Eliza and building a new school together?
Yeah. I mean, life without Eliza is different every day. A year and a half out, we're to the point now where I was saying to someone the other day, she was 6 when she passed away, and all of her friends are turning 9. In my mind, like, she's still 6, and her little sister is 6 now. And so I see all of her friends, and I think of Eliza's friends as being the same age as her little sister, but of course they're not. Eliza's always going to be 6 in my head, and so I'm still struggling with her friends getting older and what does that look like. But it's, and with my daughter, and she has the same teacher and is in the same classroom and really wanted to have that experience that her big sister had. And it's a daily up and down. Some days it's great and it feels like home and it's comfortable. And some days I walk into the classroom and I'm just in tears because I walked into that classroom every day when Eliza was in 1st grade. There are things that come by that you don't think are going to be a big deal, and they're really, really hard. And there are things that you think are going to be difficult, and it ends up being a really easy thing to do. And I think that's the weird thing about grief. Like I said, it's just finicky. You never know what's going to happen.
That's been my experience as well, 100%. I love that definition, finicky. And I really do, because that's how, I have not lost a child. And honestly, as a mom myself, to me, there is nothing harder that I can imagine in the world. Literally. There's nothing harder. So I lost my dad, and that sucked royally. And it's been 6.5 years and I still cry, like you said. And that idea that you can be unexpectedly blindsided, like I'll prepare for a certain holiday or something, and that's not the thing that gets me. But then like Nelson Mandela died and I started bawling in the car because that was somebody really special. It's my dad. He had Madiba license plates, So I love the way that you explain that to people, and people, that's okay. Like I guess part of what I want you all listening to take away is that like the grief process, it's different for everyone, and that we should be a lot more compassionate with ourselves on the journey, because it's hard. It's hard.
Yeah, you have to be. There are still days that I get up and, now I'm running a business. We've taken over an after-school program that we're using to help build Up Academy. We're still finalizing a location for Up Academy. We have an entire staff lined up. I'm organizing and running all of these things, but there are still days that I wake up and I'm just not motivated. Like there's no real reason for it, in the world. Like nothing specifically happened that day, but I just can't work. Like I stare at the computer screen and don't get anything done. And I just have to give myself that space and be like, okay, this is still the grief. Like there are just some days, and for whatever reason that, nothing specific happened, but there are still just some days that trauma and that grief takes over and I just can't focus, and that just has to be okay. I have to give myself that space to just walk away and go out for lunch or something, because there's nothing else I can do. It's not useful to get angry at myself. It's not useful to say I should be able to do something or to try and force myself into that, because
How did you get to that gentleness though? I mean, I feel like so many people don't give themselves that much beautiful grace. Do you know what it is that has had you be more self-compassionate, more patient, more gentle with your own process?
I feel like it's a combination of things. I mean, I don't generally, as an emotion, I don't think that anger is super useful.
Mm-hmm.
And so to be angry at myself or berate myself or belittle myself doesn't do me any good.
Mm-hmm.
It's
Mm-hmm.
nothing good that comes out of that. So it's not useful to do. So why go there?
So there's a pragmatic piece.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I'm a Virgo who likes everything in its place and likes things ordered. Grief is not orderly or in its place,
Mm-hmm.
but it is still, yeah, very pragmatic. Like it just doesn't make sense to do that to myself.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Mm-hmm.
and I think part of it is my yoga training. I'm certified as a 200-hour yoga instructor.
Mm-hmm.
So through going through that process and just learning about, how we use movement to be still and how we're able to love ourselves in spite of our flaws or the things that we see as imperfect. Because even though I think it may be imperfect, somebody else may look at it and that's their ideal. And, understanding that all of those things and everything in the world is up to my perception, but that isn't necessarily the perception of everybody else.
Mm-hmm.
I guess just allows for that space that, this isn't what I want to be doing, but this is the way I feel right now. And I will move through this faster and honor myself more if I just pay attention to it than if I fight it.
I love that so much. And that can be applied to any difficult or challenging feeling that we might be experiencing, right? Like if we don't, I always say like feel it first and then move through it, like you can't pretend it's not happening. For you in this particular situation, grief is so there. It's so pressing in those moments, that moments of grace. I think it's just so beautiful that you allow yourself that. And I think all of us could stand to do that better, So, okay. So here's what I want to know. Ironically, you were saying anger isn't very useful, but anger was part of what got you really fired up about creating a school, was this idea that nothing was really, really allowing for the full expression of possibility for Eliza and other kids who may not fall on the so-called typical spectrum, right? So did you ever see yourself as leading a movement? I mean, to me, it sounds like you're literally, when you speak of this, you're talking about affecting global change and awareness around how we do education, how we do inclusivity, how we do difference, and how we do, potential. Did you ever see yourself as leading movement? Do you see yourself that way now?
When you say it, it sounds grand and amazing.
I'm just saying back to you some of the things you said to me, where you said we want to create a microcosm space where everyone is valued, and that maybe that will help the 17 million children with cerebral palsy around the world. I'm saying what you said. I hear somebody who is really courageously, a year and a half after losing a child, saying, actually, still, there's more work for me to do here.
Yeah. Thanks, Sage.
So what would you say to other women that have something they really feel called to do, but they don't know where to begin, or they're scared? Because I can imagine that you must have felt some of those things too when you started this movement for Up Academy.
Yeah. It's the way you eat an elephant. You just start one bite at a time, and it grows into something that's so much bigger and grander than what you envisioned and started out with. I had a girl start yesterday, and she just graduated with a business degree in entrepreneurship. And she's like, well, what can I help with? And so I gave her a list of tasks, and she goes, well, I've never done any of this before. I don't know how to do it. I said, yeah, your degree's in entrepreneurship, and entrepreneurship's all about doing a whole bunch of things that you've never done before and figuring out how to do it. So go take these tasks. And if you haven't figured it out by Friday, let me know, because I need it next week and I'll need to figure it out myself.
How did that go over?
And she looked at me and she's like, great, I'll send you an update later this week. But it's, you decide what you want to do. And for me, I spent a lot of my 20s and a good chunk of my 30s kind of not knowing what it was that I wanted to do. I chose a major in college because I needed to graduate, and that's what all my credits were in. And so I picked that as a major. Mm-hmm. And I fell into a sales career and spent a decade in sales and marketing because it was fun and easy enough, and I got paid well, and it wasn't really what I wanted to do. And a chunk of the time that I was there, I was always looking for what is that thing that I'm supposed to be doing. And this may sound cliche, but having Eliza and having children really brought to light that thing that I'm supposed to be doing. And, for me, having a child with disabilities made it even more intense. I think every parent wants to do everything they can for their children and does the best that they can with whatever their situation and whatever tools they have available. And for me, that just seemed so much bigger and so much intense because her needs were so much greater than, in my experience, than those of my other children. Not saying that my other children don't have grand needs, because they do, and they, it's still my job to help them reach their potential and to help them find all of their opportunities and help them to become the people that they can be. But for her, it had a different meaning. And my background and my experience, I had the opportunity and the possibility and hopefully the vision to be able to make that a reality.
So with the marketing and the sales, and I think don't you have a business degree?
Yeah, I have a master's. I have an MBA.
You have an MBA, right? Right. She says casually. So all of that ironically has come full circle to support this vision, I'd imagine.
Yeah, my undergrad was in public health and dance. I spent years in nonprofit organizations and working with kids and building character traits and how do we help these kids who are coming from, whether it's a low income or in some cases the kids I worked with were homeless and coming from those situations and making their lives better and giving them possibilities and opportunities and moving into sales and spending a decade in the business world and getting my MBA. But also having the movement background. The other half of my undergrad is in dance, and I'm a yoga instructor, and I was a personal trainer, and figuring out how the body and the mind move together, and then looking at all of that through the lens of child development and my daughter's physical and motor skill development, and how does movement influence cognitive ability and intelligence, and how do we create different ways of movement to help kids who are struggling with doing certain things? And how do we bring all of that together in a collaborative, supportive, joyful learning environment?
Oh my gosh, I love it. So all of that too, to say, we just don't know how all the different pieces of our lives are going to come together some way down the path in a really meaningful and profound way. And I love that every single piece of your story has kind of woven together to serve what I'm now calling your movement. I'm calling it the Tanya movement, to really awaken what else is possible for education of all kinds and abilities of children. And I just think that's so cool that you were able to, that there was synergy. And you couldn't have possibly known when you were in your 20s working in nonprofits or in your 30s working in sales that all of this would sort of come to a head with Up Academy and the work you're now serving.
Yeah, no, absolutely not. And I think that's true for a lot of people. In our lives, we're given all of these experiences, and finding the ways to meaningfully weave them together, whatever that may be, is, a part of our humanity and a part of our contribution to the world.
Absolutely. Okay, so for those who are listening who have children with special needs, what would you say to them? First of all, how can everybody find out about Up Academy? I'm going to put it in our show notes, so make sure that you check it out at sagebhobbs.com/podcast. What would you say that would provide some, I guess this might sound cliche too, but I feel like people are always looking for hope and encouragement. So what would you say to people who are listening who may be walking a similar path or can relate to your story?
The thing, I think I kind of said it earlier, the thing for me was really finding the positive people to help us, and finding the people, for lack of a better term, who said the things I wanted to hear. Finding those hopeful people, finding those positive people, and knowing your child, because nobody knows your child like you know your child. And, I went to different evaluations, and we went to one at one point, and this woman spent 20 minutes with her and then gave me this 5-page evaluation about all of the things that my child couldn't do. And I think I've mentioned I threw all that stuff away. She doesn't know my child. And I'm looking at her, I'm like, but she will be able to do that. And she can't do that yet, but she's learning through these other things that we're doing. And it was those types of experience that I just look at, and you have to take all of that with a grain of salt and understand that all of these people, whether it's a doctor or a specialist or a friend or a neighbor who means well, like all of these people only have their own experience to work from, own base of knowledge. And that's limited because they don't know your child.
I love it. So really kind of a dance between acceptance and possibility.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? An acceptance between, because you started to know some things were not going to go as planned. There was a level of denial that started to get shed, but the hope and the possibility stayed alive.
Yeah. I mean, I remember having a conversation with her occupational therapist at school because he was setting goals that were all around handwriting. And I was sort of like, she's never going to be able to handwrite. Like, her hands and her fingers and her arms and her brain and her shoulders and all those muscles don't work together. Like, handwriting is out of her realm. Why are we spending time on this? It's going to frustrate her. It's going to frustrate you. Like, there are a million other things you could be working on. And I know there are other debates about handwriting and its necessity for brain development and fine motor skills and all of that. But all of that aside, handwriting really is not necessary. There are tons of other ways to communicate without a handwritten note. So exactly. So how do we find the ways? How do we work around that? And how do we find the solution? Because this is just wasting time and making everybody frustrated.
Right.
And
so there was times when you could really, like, what you accepted she wasn't going to be handwriting, but you stood in a possibility of how else she could express herself.
Exactly. Like, it was to terms with those, like, this is never going to be possible. And in my brain, I'm still formulating that, like, what's possible and what's not. But what really matters, like, what matters is communication, right? And being able to express yourself. And that doesn't need to be through handwriting.
Exactly. I love it. Okay. So, Tanya, thank you so much for so honestly and openly sharing your story and being so naked, real, and raw with us here. I mean, it's like your story is one that makes my heart literally break wide open. And I just so appreciate that you are willing to take your story, share it with the world, and have it be something that can do good for years and years to come, that you can take what you learned and really shine it on. And I do see you as somebody who is sort of carrying a torch and is bold and courageous and really willing to go forth in sort of uncharted territory and take a stand for what else is possible for kids. And I know that those of you who are listening can hear that in Tanya's story. So for sure, I wish you so much, like, the best with Up Academy. And I want you to make sure to keep us posted, and I'll make sure to put the information to it so other people can access it. Is there anything else you want to share with people about Up Academy before we go?
No, I feel like you've done an amazing job of drawing out our story.
Awesome. Oh, awesome.
I'm going to hold up my torch and move forward with my movement and make the world a better place.
Yes, thank you. Thank you so much, Tanya. I'll talk to you soon.
Thank you, Sage.
Thank you so much for listening to Naked Conversations. Yay! It really means the world to me every time you show up. And if you want to know more about how to work with me personally and my coaching, you can check that out over at sagebhabs.com. You can also get some great free resources over there about how to make powerful requests and many blog posts full of resources for living a naked life, as well as grab a copy of my book, Naked Communication, Courageously Create the Relationships You Really Want. And lastly, keep the conversation going with us over in the Facebook community, sagebhabs.com/Facebook, where we can keep talking about these super important and powerful topics of living a life fully expressed. Thanks again. See you next time.